Kim Philby lived two lives. The first life was brilliant. English gentleman, charming, intelligent, successful, MI6's rising star, darling of parties, favorite of women. The second life was in the shadows. Soviet agent, KGB codename, Stanley, Moscow's most valuable asset. Philby balanced these two lives for 30 years. By day, he planned operations against the Soviets. By night, he passed those plans to his Soviet handlers. He drank with friends. Then he sold information that would lead to those friends' deaths. He appeared faithful to his wives. He married 3 times. He betrayed them all, both the women and his country. How did he do it? How did he avoid capture for so long? The answer was simple. No one wanted to believe. Philby was one of them. He had attended the same schools. He belonged to the same clubs. He spoke with the same accent. An English gentleman could not be a traitor. At least, that is what they thought. This is the story of the greatest double agent in history. How he fooled the most powerful intelligence services in the world, and how he got away with it for 3 decades. Harold Adrian Russell Philby was born in India in 1912. His father was Harry St. John Philby, a colonial administrator and explorer, a difficult, brilliant man who converted to Islam and became an advisor to the Saudi royal family. Kim inherited his father's intelligence and his contempt for convention. The nickname Kim came from Rudyard Kipling's novel about a boy who becomes a spy. It was prophetic. Philby attended Westminster School, one of England's most prestigious institutions. Then Cambridge University, the pinnacle of British education. He was surrounded by the sons of the elite, future cabinet ministers, future diplomats, future intelligence officers. At Cambridge, Philby discovered communism. The 1930s were a time of crisis. The Great Depression had shattered faith in capitalism. Fascism was rising in Europe. Hitler took power in Germany. Mussolini ruled Italy. Many young intellectuals believed that only communism could save civilization. Philby was recruited by Soviet intelligence in 1934. He was 22 years old. His recruiter was Arnold Deutsch, an Austrian communist working for the NKVD, the Soviet secret police. Deutsch gave Philby instructions that would define his life. Abandon your communist friends. Appear conservative. Join the establishment. Rise as high as you can. And wait. Philby obeyed perfectly. Philby's path into intelligence was unconventional. After Cambridge, he went to Vienna, where he married a communist named Litzi Friedman. The marriage helped her escape Nazi persecution. It also connected Philby deeper into Soviet networks. Then he reinvented himself. He became a journalist, covering the Spanish Civil War from the fascist side. He cultivated relationships with Franco's officials. He appeared to be a right-wing sympathizer. This was all cover. Moscow wanted him positioned perfectly. In 1940, as World War II engulfed Europe, Philby joined the Secret Intelligence Service, MI6. His journalism experience and establishment connections opened doors. His apparent conservatism made him seem trustworthy. He rose quickly. By 1944, he was head of the Iberian section, running operations in Spain and Portugal. His performance was impressive. His colleagues admired him. In 1946, Philby was posted to Istanbul. Then came the appointment that made him truly dangerous. In 1949, he was named head of Section 9, Soviet Counterintelligence, the department responsible for fighting Soviet espionage. The fox was now guarding the henhouse. As head of Section 9, Philby knew everything. He knew the names of British agents operating inside the Soviet Union. He knew the techniques MI6 used to recruit sources. He knew the communication methods, the safe houses, the dead drops, and he reported all of it to Moscow. The consequences were devastating. Operations that should have succeeded failed. Agents who should have survived died. Sources who should have produced intelligence went silent. One example illustrates the damage. In the late 1940s, Britain and America launched Operation Valuable. The plan was to infiltrate Albania with anti-communist guerrillas, destabilize the government, and roll back Soviet influence in the Balkans. Philby knew every detail. He passed them to Moscow. Moscow warned the Albanians. The guerrillas were slaughtered. Landing party after landing party was captured or killed. The operation became a catastrophe. American CIA officers were baffled. How did the Albanians always know? There must be a leak somewhere. There was. He was sitting in Washington, liaising between MI6 and the CIA, drinking whiskey with the men whose operations he was betraying. From 1949 to 1951, Philby served as MI6 liaison to American intelligence. He had access to CIA operations, FBI investigations, and joint Anglo-American projects. He passed it all to the Soviets. The damage was incalculable. Asterisk. How did Philby maintain his cover for so long? Part of it was skill. Philby was genuinely talented. His intelligence assessments were sharp. His operational planning was sound. He was good at his job, even as he sabotaged it. Part of it was charm. Philby was extraordinarily likable. He had a warm smile, a ready wit, and a talent for making people feel comfortable. Colleagues wanted to spend time with him. Superiors saw him as a protege. He had a slight stammer that made him seem vulnerable, human, trustworthy. People with stammers were not supposed to be smooth liars. The stammer was a perfect disguise. Part of it was compartmentalization. Philby kept his two worlds completely separate. He never showed doubt. He never expressed communist sympathies. He played the role of the loyal British officer, so completely that it became his identity. He drank heavily. Perhaps the alcohol helped him cope with the cognitive dissonance, or perhaps it was simply part of the persona he cultivated. The hard-drinking intelligence man, comfortable with secrets and shadows, and part of it was the system itself. Philby was protected by the very establishment he was betraying. He was the right sort of person. He had attended the right schools. He knew the right people. In the class-conscious world of British intelligence, these things mattered more than evidence. When doubts arose, they were suppressed. When questions were asked, they were deflected. The idea that one of their own could be a traitor was simply unthinkable. Asterisk. The first crack appeared in 1951. Donald Maclean and Guy Burgess were also Cambridge spies. Both had risen high in the British establishment. Maclean was a senior diplomat with access to atomic secrets. Burgess was an eccentric but well-connected foreign office official. American codebreakers, working on the Venona project, had intercepted Soviet messages that pointed to a mole in the British embassy in Washington. The evidence led to Maclean. Philby learned of the investigation through his position. He knew Maclean would be arrested soon. He had to warn Moscow. The message reached Burgess, who was then living with Philby in Washington. Burgess flew to London and warned Maclean. On May 25, 1951, both men fled to the Soviet Union. The escape caused a sensation. Two senior British officials, defecting to Moscow. The newspapers were full of speculation. Who had warned them? Suspicion fell on Philby immediately. He was known to be close to Burgess. They had shared a house. The connection was too obvious to ignore. MI5 interrogated Philby intensively. The questioning was hostile, but Philby held firm. He stammered, he sweated, he denied everything. And in the end, they let him go. There was no hard evidence. Philby's colleagues vouched for him. The old boy network protected its own. He was forced to resign from MI6, but he was not arrested. He was not tried. He was given a small severance and sent on his way. The traitor had escaped. Again, asterisk, from 1951 to 1955, Philby lived in limbo. He was out of MI6, officially under suspicion, but not charged with any crime. He worked as a journalist. He struggled financially. The charmed life seemed to be over. Then, in 1955, a strange thing happened. A member of Parliament named Marcus Lipton used parliamentary privilege to accuse Philby directly of being a Soviet spy. Philby demanded a response. Foreign Secretary Harold Macmillan obliged. He stood in the House of Commons and declared that there was no evidence against Philby. The government had conducted an investigation and found nothing. Philby was officially cleared. He held a press conference. He denied the accusations confidently. He threatened legal action. Lipton was forced to apologize. It was an extraordinary moment. A Soviet spy had been publicly accused, and the British government had defended him. The establishment had closed ranks. In 1956, MI6 quietly rehired Philby. They sent him to Beirut as a journalist, but he was also working for the service again. Officially, he was rehabilitated. For 7 more years, Philby operated in the Middle East. He reported on politics. He made contacts, and almost certainly, he continued spying for the Soviets. The double life continued. The end began with a defector. In 1961, Anatoly Golitsyn defected from the KGB to the United States. He brought with him detailed information about Soviet penetration of Western intelligence services. Golitsyn's information pointed to a high-level mole in British intelligence. The descriptions matched Philby. Old suspicions were revived. Then came Flora Solomon. Solomon was an old acquaintance of Philby's. In the 1930s, Philby had tried to recruit her for Soviet intelligence. She had refused, but she had never forgotten. In 1962, angered by something Philby had written, Solomon approached MI5. She told them about Philby's recruitment attempt decades earlier. It was the first direct evidence of his communist connections. MI6 decided to confront Philby. They sent Nicholas Elliott, an old friend and colleague, to Beirut. Elliott had defended Philby for years. Now he had to face the truth. In January 1963, Elliott met with Philby and presented the evidence. He offered a deal. Confess, and you will receive immunity. Return to London quietly. There will be no trial, no public scandal. Philby initially agreed. He confessed to some of his activities, but he was buying time. On January 23, 1963, Philby disappeared. He boarded a Soviet freighter in Beirut harbor and sailed to Odessa. From there, he traveled to Moscow. He would never return to England. Philby arrived in Moscow, a hero. He was given Soviet citizenship. He was awarded the Order of Lenin and other high honors. He was made a colonel in the KGB. He received an apartment, a pension, and all the privileges of the Soviet elite. But the reality was less glamorous than the propaganda. Philby was lonely. He missed England. He missed the life he had known. Moscow was cold, grey, and foreign. The Soviet bureaucracy was stifling. The surveillance was constant. He drank more heavily than ever. His health deteriorated. His marriages failed. His first Soviet wife, Melinda McLean, was the ex-wife of his fellow defector Donald McLean. That relationship collapsed in bitterness. He eventually married a Russian woman named Rufina, who cared for him in his final years. By all accounts, they were happy together. Philby spent his Moscow years writing his memoirs, advising the KGB on British psychology, and occasionally meeting Western journalists. He never expressed regret. He maintained until the end that he had made the right choice. Communism was the future, he said. The Soviet Union was building a better world. The West was corrupt and decadent. Whether he truly believed this, or whether it was simply the story he told himself to live with his choices, no one can say. Kim Philby died in Moscow on May 11, 1980. He was 76 years old. He was buried with full military honors. 3 years later, the Soviet Union collapsed. What did Kim Philby cost the West? The full accounting is impossible. Much remains classified. Much was never documented. But the outlines are clear. Hundreds of agents compromised. Men and women who risked their lives for the West were identified and eliminated. Networks built over years were rolled up in days. Intelligence sources went silent forever. Operations sabotaged. Albania, the Baltic states. Attempted infiltrations of the Soviet bloc failed because Moscow knew they were coming. Resources were wasted. Opportunities were lost. Strategic advantage surrendered. For decades, the Soviets knew Western intentions, capabilities, and vulnerabilities. They could plan accordingly. The information Philby provided shaped Soviet strategy throughout the Cold War and beyond the immediate damage. There was the institutional harm. MI6 was paralyzed by suspicion for years. Officers doubted their colleagues. Recruitment suffered. Morale collapsed. The Cambridge spy ring did more damage to British intelligence than any foreign enemy, and Philby was the most damaging of them all. The question has haunted historians for decades. Why did Kim Philby betray his country? Ideology is the obvious answer. Philby was recruited as a communist. He believed, at least initially, that he was serving a higher cause. The Soviet Union represented the future. Capitalism was doomed. But ideology alone does not explain 30 years of betrayal. Many people hold political beliefs without committing treason. Something more was at work. Perhaps it was the thrill. Philby lived on the edge for 3 decades. The danger, the deception, the constant risk of exposure. Some people are addicted to such excitement. Perhaps it was ego. Philby fooled the most powerful intelligence services in the world. He manipulated men who thought they were his superiors. There is a certain satisfaction in that kind of deception. Perhaps it was resentment. Despite his establishment credentials, Philby was an outsider in some ways. His father was eccentric, controversial, often absent. Perhaps betraying the system was a way of rejecting it, or perhaps, having started, he simply could not stop. The deeper he went, the more impossible it became to turn back. The cost of confession was too high. Continuing the lie was easier than facing the truth. Philby himself offered little insight. In his memoirs and interviews, he maintained the ideological justification. He was a communist. He served the cause. He had no regrets. But there are hints of something darker. The heavy drinking, the failed marriages, the isolation even among his Soviet hosts. These suggest a man who was never truly at peace with his choices. The double life took its toll, even on the century's greatest spy. What is the legacy of Kim Philby? First, he exposed the vulnerabilities of the British establishment. The old boy network, with its assumptions of loyalty based on class and education, was shown to be dangerously naive. Reforms followed. Vetting procedures were tightened. The cozy world of gentlemen spies became more professional. Second, he demonstrated the power of patient intelligence work. The Soviet strategy of recruiting young idealists and waiting decades for them to rise to power was vindicated. Long-term thinking paid enormous dividends. Third, he became a symbol. For the Soviets, he was proof of Western decadence and vulnerability. For the West, he was a warning about the dangers of ideological subversion. For spy novelists and filmmakers, he was an endless source of inspiration. John le Carré, himself a former intelligence officer, drew heavily on Philby for his fictional traitors. The ambiguity, the charm, the cold calculation, all reflected in characters like Bill Hayden in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Kim Philby lived two lives. He served two masters. He betrayed everyone who trusted him, and he got away with it. He died in bed, in Moscow, an old man with medals on his chest. The greatest traitor in British history never faced justice. Some would call that a victory. Others would call it the ultimate loneliness. The double life was over, but its shadow remains.